If you like fusion summoning, then this is going to be the deck for you. What is up, guys? This is tcgsam here, and in today's video I'm coming at you guys with a branded Chimera Shaddoll deck profile for the September 2023 format. And in this video I'm going to be going over how these engines work together and show you the build that I've put together, because these three engines actually have pretty good synergy with each other, and of course can all be played as standalone engines. So even if you don't see one part of the deck, you can still play with another part, which is really great. So with all that being said, let's just hop straight into the profile. So starting things off with the Chimera engine, we are playing 3 copies of SWORDKNIGHT. So of course it's the best starter for the Chimera engine, but it's a light monster for the Shaddoll part of the engine. And in the combo, you're able to bring back SWORDKNIGHT using the Big Wing BERFOMET effect, and that gives you a light monster on the field to go into Shaddoll Construct. And Shaddoll Construct is just one of the strongest Shaddoll cards out there, so just having a very searchable and accessible light target in this deck already makes the Shaddoll deck a lot better. But also, like I mentioned, it's just the best starter for the Chimera engine. And then next we're playing 3 CORNFIELD COATL, so another starter for the Chimera engine, just helps you grab your Chimera pieces a lot easier. And then we're also playing 3 GAZELLE, the king of mythical claws. So GAZELLE is incredibly strong in this deck as well, because serving as a normal summon earth monster means if you do want to play a card like El Shaddoll in your extra deck, you're going to be able to do so and have a very accessible earth target. But also it's pretty solid to just fuse away with, because it's able to get you access to your illusion engine either next turn or as additional fusion material. So not a bad normal summon in this deck either. And then next up, we're playing 2 copies of Big Wing BERFOMET. Don't want to brick on this. 2 is, I think, all you need in this deck. You don't really need 3, because the deck, even if you start running out of BERFOMETs, you're able to play with the other engines in it. And then finally, 3 copies of Chimera Fusion, so just one of the strongest fusion spells in this deck. Helps you play on your opponent's turn, make cards like Guardian Chimera and stuff. And then for the branded engine, we are just playing 3 copies of Branded Fusion and 1 copy of Fallen of ALBAZ. So this engine is incredibly good with both sides of the deck. In the Chimera side of the deck, we're able to summon RINDBRUMM, and that is a starter for our Chimera engine. But also, if we have access to our Chimera engine, we can also use Branded Fusion to either go into MIRRORJADE or go into the Shaddoll side of our deck and go through MIRRORJADE. So what we can do is dump a Shaddoll monster to summon LUBELLION, and LUBELLION can shuffle back ALBAZ and itself to summon MIRRORJADE, and then not only do you have future Branded Fusions live and a MIRRORJADE, but you also have access to your Shaddoll engine as well. So just a very strong card that's usable with all parts of the engine, just a very big blowout fusion spell. Now moving on to the Shaddoll part of the deck, we are playing 2 copies of Shaddoll SQUAMATA. I think SQUAMATA is probably one of the best ones to fuse with, because you're able to just send anything you need for that particular situation. It's very flexible. You're going to be fusing a lot in this deck, so just having access to SQUAMATA being one of the best fusion materials is just really strong. Similarly with HEDGEHOG, HEDGEHOG is also one of the better fusion materials in this deck, because when you fuse with it, you're going to be able to search out any Shaddoll monster from your deck to your hand. So that's going to give you future fusion fodder for cards like Chimera Fusion or whatever, and that's just very strong in this deck, just keeping hand advantage with a lot of monsters in it. Next up, we're playing 2 copies of REESHADDOll. It gets you the extra Shaddoll body onto the board and acts as a different attribute for APKALLONE, so there's not much to really say about that. And then for the 1 of Shaddolls, we are playing 1 copy of Shaddoll Beast, 1 copy of Shaddoll Dragon, and 1 copy of Shaddoll FALCO. So Beast is pretty standard. You do get the extra draw, which is nice, but this deck doesn't really struggle with hand advantage, because you do get a lot of advantage off the Chimera engine. Dragon is good as just generic back row removal that's searchable in this deck. And then FALCO was an interesting one. You definitely don't have to play it, but I wanted to play a slightly bigger Shaddoll count in this deck because of the prevalence of fusion spells and the accessibility of fusion spells. Shaddolls are just one of the best monsters to fuse with, so by maxing out on as many good Shaddolls as we can without clogging on them is sort of the optimal thing that we're going for with this deck. I felt like FALCO was pretty good because it got you an extra monster back on the board for additional fusion summons on the opponent's turn, but you can play a card like Shaddoll Hollow, and Shaddoll Hollow serves a few purposes. 1, it's a different attribute for APKALLONE, so it's a fiend monster, which means you can search it with your Shaddoll engine and guarantee that Chimera Fusion is live in some cases. I don't know how often that comes up, but that's just definitely an option that's out there, so you can play Shaddoll Hollow over FALCO if you so choose. And then for the rest of the Shaddoll engine, we are just playing 3 copies of Shaddoll Fusion. Also one of the best fusion spells in this deck. It is a little more restrictive than Chimera Fusion in a sense, since you could only summon Shaddoll monsters, but still very good fusion spell. Similarly, Shaddoll Fusion is just a huge blowout going second. It's also just one of the better fusion spells in this deck, so you just want to keep seeing these cards. And just making sure you're able to max out on the fusion spells means you're rarely going to have brick hands where you have a handful of monsters you can't do anything with. And then finally, one copy of Shaddoll Schism for the Shaddoll engine. You're able to get Construct very easily in this deck, so just using away the Construct later on or turning into Gravity Controller means you can get Shaddoll Schism to your hand for your opponent's turn. And then now for the non-engine of this deck, this is completely up to you, but I chose to play the 6 books, or 3 Book of Moon and 3 copies of Book of Eclipse. So these cards are of course very good into the meta currently at the time of recording, but in this deck they serve some additional purpose as well, since you're able to protect cards like Big Wing Berfomet from Infinite Impermanence and Veiler, because resolving that search means you're already so far ahead. And then it doesn't really matter if the monsters are face down, since you're going to be able to fuse with them regardless, so just books having that extra synergy with this deck is also really nice. So that's going to do it for the main deck. It's a clean 40 cards. Unfortunately, you don't have too much room for non-engine in these sorts of like pile decks, but I think the books are probably one of the only things that really make sense here, just because it outs like the deck's biggest problems, like a Rise Art, and also gives you that extra protection from effect negation. So moving on to the extra deck, let's start off with the Chimera engine. We're going to be playing 2 copies of Chimera, the King of Phantom Beast. I think 2 is a solid number in this deck, especially since we're not playing like a pure Chimera deck. Chimera, the King of Phantom Beast, is just really great card of the engine. Not much to really say about that. We are playing 1 copy of Chimera, the Illusion Beast, so you definitely don't have to play this. You can choose to play a card like El Shaddoll Shekinaga over it. I ended up cutting Shekinaga for this, just because I wanted the option to have a very good OTK enabler in this deck, because you can't really play a card like Boral Sword or Access Code in it, so I figured that Chimera, the Illusion Beast, would be pretty good for that. And then we're playing 1 copy of Magnum, the Reliever. This card, of course, is very good. You're able to trigger it easily with just your King of Phantom Beast in the graveyard, or your bunch of Shaddoll fusion spells like Schism and El Shaddoll Fusion. And then we are playing 1 copy of Guardian Chimera. I know this is pretty low for a Chimera engine deck, but since we're only using the Chimera stuff as an engine, and we're not playing cards like Patchwork, so we don't have access to polymerization, 1 Guardian Chimera I think is all we really need. You're able to play on your opponent's turn already with the other Shaddoll fusion spells. You could also just go into Magnum over the Chimera if the second one would ever come up, but you definitely need to play at least 1 just because of how strong it is. We are playing 1 copy of RINDBRUMM. So RINDBRUMM is useful when you don't have access to the Chimera part of your engine and you have Branded Fusion. This just gets you access to that, which is incredibly powerful. Of course, it has a very nice graveyard effect as well, so even if you only play 1 ALBAZ, you're still able to, once it hits the grave, banish it, summon out ALBAZ, quick fuse with your opponent as well, which is really nice. And then we are playing 1 copy of MIRRORJADE, so just the branded boss monster, not much to really say about that. If your Branded Fusion is used for the Shaddoll engine or just as a standalone card, this is the boss monster that you're going to be going into, and of course it's still a very strong monster. We're playing 1 copy of LUBELLION, so you're able to get into the Shaddoll part of your engine if you really need to. And then 1 copy of ALBION. So ALBION is interesting. You don't necessarily have to play this, because you don't really have too many great light monsters to send from the main deck to the graveyard. But I figured that ALBION might come up in some cases to be used as fodder for the MIRRORJADE. And since we're not playing a card like Springen's Kit, you don't need to play one of the ones that summon during the end phase. So I think ALBION is probably decent enough. This is sort of like a flex spot though. You don't really have to play ALBION. You could technically just use MIRRORJADE to send LUBELLION or RINDBRUMM, and that would be good enough. And then for the Shaddoll part of the engine, we're playing 1 copy of El Shaddoll APKALLONE. Very powerful Shaddoll card, not much to really say about that. And then we're playing 2 copies of El Shaddoll WINDA, also a very strong Shaddoll card and the best disruption that the Shaddoll engine has to offer. Just setting up El Shaddoll WINDA and then protecting it with a card like Chimera Fusion is just so strong. And then we're playing 2 copies of El Shaddoll Construct. Like I mentioned at the start of the profile, you have access to a very easily found Mirror SWORDKNIGHT that comes back when you do your regular Chimera combo. So you'll just always have that light monster available, and that's why even not playing more light monsters in the main deck, like light hand traps or whatnot, should still be okay because of a card like Mirror SWORDKNIGHT. Like I mentioned, Mirror SWORDKNIGHT is just super accessible through both the Branded Fusion and the Chimera engine itself. So I think 2 is a very solid number. And then finally, we're playing 1 copy of Gravity Controller, just an honorary Shaddoll card. Just being able to turn any fusion monster into this to be able to grab back a Shaddoll spell or trap is just super strong, and definitely needed in this deck. You don't want to play more links than just this, because you have quite a few things that lock you into fusions only, so you want to play as many fusions as possible and as few other things as possible. So that's going to do it for the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section below. Do stay tuned for the test hands that's going to be coming out in a few days after this one, so you can learn some of the combos of this deck and some of the capabilities it has. But with all that being said, I just want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Take care.